Good morning, everyone. This is Grant with State of the Spark, and I am so pumped for Fun with Thinking Friday. So today is episode 66, I think. Episode 66, yes. And it's Fun with Thinking Friday. That simply means that we're actually going to cover new thought tools that can actually help you think better. The goal is thinking better. Let me get my chat up there. Just bear with me there. The goal is to be able to think better, to actually bring intelligence to the table and not only think better for yourself, think better for your business, think better for your family, think better for your friends, because when you think better, you live better. So we're going to actually be taking care of Fun with Thinking Friday. I'm going to give you an insight with Fun with Thinking Friday on how we actually pumped up our profits. Which is why we're talking about Pump with Profits. But we're also going to talk about how you can become unstuckable. And that's so that you actually don't get stuck in your own thinking and can get breakthroughs there. But obviously, we're going to reflect a little bit on politics. We're going to reflect a little bit on different aspects of life in order to get this concept down. And it's a powerful thinking tool that once you get down and you think you know this thinking tool, but you actually don't. But before any of that, I have a cup of gratitude here, and this lovely cup of gratitude is simply this. I am so happy and grateful and full of joy for the friends in my life that are highly intelligent, highly skilled, and contributing to life. For the web designers I know, the graphic designers, for the artists I know, for the real estate investors I know, to the human influence coaches I know and the business owners I know, I am deeply grateful to you for everything you've brought into my life and have made me better for. I can't thank you enough. I'm full of gratitude, and this morning cup of gratitude is to you. Here we are. So good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing fan-freaking-tastic. We've got a few bits of other news before we jump into Fun with Thinking Friday. So let's grab this real quick. Number one, I did a preview of this yesterday in the Goals and Gratitude and Small Business group. Jump over to the Goals and Gratitude group if you haven't joined yet. There's a good overview I do. But I'm featuring the fact that Google has launched a holiday hub for your small business. This Google Holiday Hub has a ton of stuff to help you get your business ready for the holidays. The first thing it has is some killer articles in there on, how to get ready for the holidays, how to think about your digital web presence, how to think about websites, how to think about trends, how to actually use the tools in Google to actually understand the trends going on in the marketplace even better. But the tools that I really love, there's two tools I really love. One is a website analysis tool that can actually show you some of the bullet checklist points that you need to upgrade your website on, like, do you have a live chat? Do you have a return policy? Things like that. Do you have free shipping or no free shipping? And is it clear? Tools like that have been hugely beneficial, hugely beneficial to the public. So I'm going to have this link right here. Let's save this link. And let's paste this link there, boop, and then let's actually make sure that my audience is set to public. There we go. There we go. Now we're public. Now we're live. For some reason, my settings there were set to friends only. But Fun with Thinking Friday proceeds. Here, let me put this here and this here. Boom. All right. So then the other piece of other news is this. Starlink actually sent internet to several towns in Washington state to combat fires. And so what this basically means is that there's a town in Washington state called the town of Malden. And this town of Malden has been decimated by fires. Well, Starlink actually sent 7 little terminals to the town of Malden and to that county in general in order to give them access to the internet. So both residents and emergency responders are now able to hand around these terminals and actually coordinate resources, coordinate rescue efforts, coordinate all sorts of interactions, but using Starlink. And, a lot of people are going, hey, when can I get Starlink? When can I get satellite internet in my town? And Starlink's basic response is right now we're going to focus on those who need it absolutely most so that they can get it anywhere in the world. Now, what blows me away about this is this. You have hundreds now and soon thousands of satellites spinning around the planet. And though they're moving at 18,000 miles an hour, at any moment, they can dial internet right to a geographic location. So that's powerful. Starlink is using its superpowers to help emergency responders. And other news number 3, one of the hottest planets in the universe has been discovered. It's known as Hot Jupiter. And it was recently discovered that Hot Jupiter is part of a very small solar system, very far away, and its surface temperature is 5,700 degrees Fahrenheit. 5,700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a huge find, that a planet could, still exist, but have surface temperatures this hot. Other fun facts. This is hot enough to turn metal into gas. It's a gas giant. That's why it's called Hot Jupiter. Its annual year is 2.7 days. It's spinning around its sun so fast that its year is 2.7 days. It's 1.6 times the size of Jupiter, and it has permanent day and night. So, comparison. The comparison is simply this. Our sun, surface temperatures on our sun is 10,800 degrees, so it's only half that temperature. And, of course, right now in sunny Florida, it's a balmy 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can get a view of how hot this planet, Hot Jupiter, is. So that's a fun fact. I don't have a link to that article. I do have a link to the small business with Google, boom, and I do have a link to the Starlink article right there. So boom, that is your Friday dose of other news that doesn't have anything at all to do with COVID or anything at all to do with politics. We're just having a happy, fun morning of other interesting news. Let's move on with Fun with Thinking Friday and how we're going to turn our thinking upside down, literally. Here we go. So, whether it's politics or how you think about your business should be run, you and I establish religious doctrine around our thinking very quickly. Now, some people are like, I'm not religious about business. I'm not religious about politics. Just think about this for a second. If I were to ask you, for example, does heaven exist? Is God real? Even if you're one of my lovely Christian friends that have faith, or non-Christian friends that do technically believe in heaven, you likely have a response that's kind of centrist moderate. You might go, well, it's hard to know, but I believe in heaven. So you believe, but you're open, or at least you seem like you're open. Now, if you're one of my lovely friends of science and technology, and I simply say, science is wrong a lot of the time, you probably shrug and go, yeah, the point of science is to be disprovable, but I really believe in the scientific method and the scientific process, but you believe in that thing. But you kind of have a centrist, reasonable view. Now, these are the two extremes, science and religion, but most people that you encounter, they're not going to get red and in your face. They're literally just going to respond and go, yeah. But I wouldn't call that too dogmatic or religious. However, if I said some trigger words, if I said the word, for example, abortion or gun rights, or Black Lives Matter, chances are you would have an emphatic, passionate response. You have a position on these things. And I would say that your position is probably far more extreme, dogmatic, nearly religious, as the response to the previous questions I asked actually about religion, heaven, or science. We get into a line of thinking. You and me get into a line of thinking and don't even realize that we've become extreme. Now, what's worse than this is I believe that this is also going on where we have the same degree of beliefs, but in our businesses. And because businesses aren't really politicized that much, we don't even realize that our beliefs are there, but they're hamstringing us. So thoughts like, what type of market do you serve? Whether you want growth or no growth, whether you want a calm work day or an exciting one, whether you want to do social media or not, whether you want to serve this niche or not, whether you want to work in this geography or not, chances are you have extreme beliefs on these things. But they're not politicized. You don't have a debater getting in your face. You just hold on to these beliefs. Ideas like these can cause you to get stuck. They can cause your business to get stuck. They can cause your profit margins to get stuck. You can get very narrow in your thinking. One of the major problems we had for years in our business was how to pay profits. Now, we know how profits are calculated. Income minus expense equals profit. We know that. But is it? And if someone would have challenged us on this, Brock says, I'm pretty religious about not being religious about anything, but, religion. And that is how most people are, Brock. Most people are like that. I'm like that. And we're always like that. In fact, that's a mental tool of self-preservation to create extreme positions on something. And then it gets shoved into your unconscious is how we create a mental map of the world. That's an efficient function of the brain. But if you did not select the things that were in there, if you did not choose the map you've made of the world, it could also be destructive. And in the example I was giving is the major problem we have about how we paid profits. So yes, I gave examples about religion, science, about politics like abortion or gun rights or who should be in the presidential office. We get stuck in our brains and we cannot move forward with life. And I think the things that we have the higher stakes on, we have the same degree of beliefs, but they're not challenged on a daily basis. And that's our business. That's our passion project. That's the project that we're trying to give birth into the world. The vision we talked about yesterday, we actually have strong opinions about these things, but they're not being challenged. So here's what we need to do. We need to become more flexible. We need to have more flexible mental tools to unstick ourselves. Specifically, we can use extremes like the political landscape in order to root out where we have stuck mental models so that we can unstick the things that matter more, like our business and our local politics scene. So we need to open ourselves up to other ways of thinking about our business to give us more options. We want more optionality, but we need more options. How do we create more options? Well, first off, invert that. We don't have options because we have a narrow view. I want to grow my business. So, okay, you've got a growth mindset, but I only serve this geographical range. Well, how's that working for you? I don't have too many options. Well, you have a belief. No, I don't have a belief. I'm just going to work in this geography. Well, pause. Why don't you think you have a belief? So we actually need to discover how we have beliefs and what beliefs we're holding. And this is the mental model I want to present for you today. And it's simply this: inversion thinking. Brock says quarterly profits leads to everything or is greater than everything. I'm not really sure if that's a greater sign or a leads to sign. Also, why startups are successful at all ever. So I think what he's saying is quarterly profits are why startups are successful at all ever. And I would agree with that. Whether or not you have quarterly, we pay out profits quarterly, but we collect them on every pay cycle, which is twice a month. Profit first is twice a month. I'll actually unpack that for you. So the mental model I present for your consideration today is inversion thinking. Now, simply put, inversion thinking is taking whatever thought that you are stuck on, whatever problem you have. Well, Grant, I'm not stuck in this thinking. If you have a problem, you're stuck in that thinking. So like the idea of growth, and you have a rule. So I want to grow. Grant, that's my problem. That's not your problem. That's the vision. So what are you myopic about? Well, here are my rules. I only want to serve this geographical range. I'm open for the rest. Well, that's a pretty easy way to see that where you're stuck is on your geography. So you would zoom in on that and you'd invert the thinking. And we're going to cover I've got basically 3 different ways to actually invert your thinking on a thing that you can exercise. There's a great book on this, Greater Than. So Brock says quarterly profits is greater than everything. It's also why startups are successful at all ever. I agree with that. With his sweat emoji, I don't know if he's frustrated by that fact or doesn't agree with that fact, but most people are frustrated by the fact that quarterly profits is more important than everything. But it is also why startups are successful. So I feel that. So we've got 3 ways you can invert your thinking, and there's a great book on this. I don't even have it right here. It's called Six Simple Solutions That Saved Mankind by an actual rocket scientist, Tom Logsdon. He actually helped with the Apollo 13 rescue. Phenomenal little book. He animated it himself, and I'll pull it off the shelf one day and let you check that out. But first off, what is inversion thinking? In the profit example of our business, we knew that we had a profit margin issue. We couldn't grow. We couldn't hire people. Me and Marissa couldn't take vacations because as soon as we got profits, we put it to all the other budget, and then we saw what we had at the end of the day, and that was our profit. And then someone came along, Adam Welchel, and I'm so grateful for Adam for this. He came along and challenged our thinking and said, well, what would it look like to have profits? That first question, and we'll talk about that modality of inversion thinking, but that first question made us conjure what the vision should be. And then we started working backwards. You see, inversion does this primarily. It gets you to think with the end in mind and reverse engineer. It gets you thinking backwards instead of forwards. In fact, the 2 major components of inversion thinking is the difference between forward thinking and backward thinking. In fact, I think a lot of times when people deliberate with your vision, it's because you're forward thinking. You're thinking into the future, and it's tough for people to kind of build that vision that way. It's not tough for imaginative people to go, well, today is a Friday, I could do this, and by Monday I could do that, and then Wednesday I could be a millionaire. I could do forward thinking. But a lot of people have a sense that that's not really possible. They have a sense for it. I'm imaginative. I could imagine that. Backward thinking is a safe ground for everyone because it makes you start to answer the how as you move back from the vision. This is actually what the V-Gospel model that we covered yesterday was. Brock says if corporations didn't believe in quarterly profits so much at the exclusion of new opportunities, no startups would ever be successful because corporations have more resources. Let me read that again. If corporations didn't believe in quarterly profits so much at the exclusion of new opportunities, no startups would ever be successful because corporations have more resources. I see. So yes, in general, for my conversations with Brock, his view here is that corporations get myopic about quarterly profits. And corporations largely do their accounting from income minus expenses equal profit margin. And then they put that in an account and then they hoard it. And then that hoarding gets distributed to the owners or the investors. And in Brock's paradigm, this is why, and they're avoiding new opportunities. And this is why no startups would ever be successful. Startups are successful because they're dumping money into R&D. They're dumping money into innovative thinking, whereas corporations are just taking that profit margin and putting it to the side. I agree. That is a dynamic going on. Now, I do believe big corporations are doing some R&D, but not nearly as much as they could be doing. So inversion thinking actually says, let's begin with the end in mind and build it backwards. In fact, some circles call this subtractive thinking versus additive thinking. It's almost like doing additive thinking is too easy. Incremental thinking is too easy, and you often get stuck in the same mental ruts. But if you start with the end in mind and do subtractive thinking, you start going, okay, if I had $1 million, how did I get to 900,000? How do I get to 500,000? And then you can kind of reverse engineer a plan. Now that's from a planning perspective. But let's talk about ideas. Let's talk about opinions. So real quick, principle 1, and I've got just 3 of these very quickly. Principle 1 on inversion thinking is you can invert from the end of the idea succeeding. This is what I've been describing. If you have an idea in your business, or even if you have an opinion about politics, Second Amendment rights, or abortion, or I'm going to vote on this guy because this guy is not anti or pro-abortion. I have a friend who abortion is a trigger word for her. She's passionate about it. And she's literally voting for an undesirable candidate because the other candidate is pro-abortion. Now, inversion thinking would simply go, okay, let's say you elect this person in, but given their character, given their moral construct, given what we've had for the last few years, what would we look like at the end of the next few years? And begin reverse engineering some of the things that could occur. So it often helps you work your way backwards. And statistically, you actually have fewer pitfalls when you do subtractive thinking versus additive thinking. Additive thinking, like an entrepreneur does, forward thinking, I imagine a lot. And because I'm imagining, what I often don't imagine is the pitfalls. What I often imagine is the success. But when you do subtractive thinking, you're actually reverse engineering. How did I end up at $1 million? How did we end up with such a crazy presidency? How did we end up with less Second Amendment rights or less choice as it comes to a woman's body? Like, what are all of these things? How did we end up here? If you do subtractive thinking, you're able to actually identify pitfalls more. So when you're in the state of mind to actually start planning, you need to invert your thinking and invert it from the end of your idea succeeding and move your way backwards so that you can identify pitfalls. Now, this is often a debate amongst thinkers because people like me always want to think forward. And how-to people, detail-oriented people, they generally always want to think reverse engineer or even mid-engineer because they want to identify the pitfalls. And you need both. In our profit margin case, we actually pondered what it would be like to have profit at the end of 5 years. How would our business look? How would we operate? And then we actually started realizing, well, profit, if we were profitable in 5 years, profit is now actually the bottom line. And then further, what we said is if we continue in our current line of thinking, where we have very narrow margins, where would we be in 5 years? So we actually said, okay, in 5 years, what would it look like if we had this narrow profit margins? And it did not take us long to count those pennies. And then that vision did not look so good with narrow margins. And then we'd ask ourselves, well, what would year 4 look like? Well, we were grueling morning, noon, and night for very narrow margins. And what would year 3 look like? Well, we would be hopeful, maybe a little hopeful, but we would still be working morning, noon, and night for narrow margins. And that didn't look so good. And as soon as that myopia hit us, and we could see that what this would play out to and what it would look like reverse engineering that inversion thinking started making us be more receptive to other options. Well, maybe we don't want to calculate profit this way. So let's look at this one step further. Principle 2 is inverting from the opposite idea. In terms of profit, what it then does is, okay, let's invert this from the end of the opposite idea. Currently, our idea is income minus expense equals profits. But what if we inverted that and did income minus profit equals expenses? And how we need to bootstrap and tighten our belt based on what's available to us if we carved out a profit. So we pondered this and we thought, what does 5 years out look like if we actually increased our profit margin to X instead of just meager Y? Well, in 5 years, it would look like this, and we'd be more hopeful, and maybe we could hire. And then you'd back up, and we realize, wow, we could hire within 6 months if we actually flipped the script on our profit margin. And if we actually started righting the ship and insisted on a few other changes that we were, not just with profit, but with how work happens and how to hire, and should we borrow to hire, should we not borrow to hire, all of those questions we challenged, and we took the opposite idea and worked backwards. Now, when it comes to political opinions, if you will, this is often referred to in debate as the Iron Man. This is instead of the straw man, where you present your opponent's case in the weakest possible way, you actually think about your opponent's case in the strongest possible way. For example, my lovely brother, we enjoy each other very much. He is a strong Second Amendment believer. And if someone came to him and challenged his Second Amendment beliefs, the Iron Man would simply poke holes in his entire argument, or the straw man would poke holes in his opponent's entire argument. And they're probably loopholes story loops that him as a Second Amendment person has gone through over and over and over again in his own head. He's done this probably many times. But the Iron Man would actually take his opponent's belief and actually start building this guy up. Why would you do that in a debate? Number one, you would do it to have a comprehensive understanding, because the purpose of debate is to understand the sides. Now, too often when someone has a strong opinion, whether it's Second Amendment or my friend with abortion or some of the people I know about the two-party. Someone with a show only knows their pain. Why I'm upset. One of the arguments me and Marissa, or the debates me and Marissa have had over the Electoral College has been the pain is underrepresentation.